Yo, what up? Welcome back to another quick Flutter tutorial. I think we've made some pretty good progress so far on our app, but just to sum up what we have so far, we've sorted out the basic authentication and we can sign users in, and importantly we can also register a new user, and also we added this section here where we can get some more user details. Now if you think about the CRUD operations, which stands for create, read, update and delete. So those are the four basic operations that you're going to need when creating a functioning app. So we've addressed the first C in it, like creating data such as the first name, last name and the age, and we can now store this data in our database. So for this video, let's turn our attention to the next letter, which is R, which stands for reading. Okay, so we want to read the data and just display it back onto our home page. So just to keep everyone on the same page, like let's just register a new user right now. So let's say Michael Jordan. I don't know how old he is, like 50. michaeljordan@gmail.com. And if we create a user here, currently it just brings us to this home page, which I've got opened up, and right now we're just saying, okay, you're signed in as your user email and we have the option to sign out. So in this home page, I kind of want to just display the other users as well that signed up on the app. So if I go back to my database, we created this collection of users and each user has a different document attached to it. So you can see these are the current users that we have signed up, and this is the one we made just then. So with all of these users, let's just display it back in a list and try to grab some information about the user, like the username. Okay, and we'll present it nicely in our app. So essentially we're going to find this collection of users and we're going to go through each document and we're going to grab the first name of each document. So let's come back to our code and go to your homepage.dart file. And the first thing I'm going to do is to create a list of document IDs. So let's call this a list of, it's just strings. And let's call it doc IDs. And then let's create a method for getting these document IDs. So future, let's call it get doc IDs. Awesome. So if I say await Firebase firestore.instance and get the collection of, we called it users. So this will just bring us to this collection here. And then let's go through each document and grab these IDs. So we can now say just get, and you can see if you hover over the get method, it just says fetch the documents for this query. Okay, and then there's a lot of extra things we can do here. So we can say then, and then you get this value, okay, which is just our snapshot. So I'm actually going to call this snapshot. You can call it whatever you want, but I just like the naming to be very intuitive. So with these snapshot, what you want to do is get the snapshot, and you can see here the docs, and for each of the documents, let's, first of all, I'm just going to print out what this element is saying. Okay, so let's print out the element and maybe the reference. Okay, cool. And then if I just initialize this state, let's just run this method when we first open this home page. Okay, so when we initialize the state, let's just get this method to execute and let's see what happens. So if I just show you here, you can see this bit of code going through the collection of users and then getting the snapshot for each of the documents. You can see what it prints out. So the document reference, and you can see that this is the document IDs. So that's for each of the different users. And so what I'm going to do with these guys is just to add it into my list of document IDs. Okay, so I just want to collect them up. So let's go to the element, reference, and then the ID. Okay, so this ID will give us this document ID, and I'm just going to go through each of the documents and just add it so that I have it conveniently in this list of strings. Cool, and just to make this look a little bit more nicer, like I said, just to do with the naming, I don't want to call it element, I just want to call it document. Makes the code a bit more readable. Awesome, so now that we have the list of documents, we can come down to under this material button. So we have a big column here, and at the bottom, let's create a list view and just expand to fill up the rest of the space. And I'm going to create a list view builder. So I created a separate tutorial to dive more in depth about list views if you need, so check that out. But essentially, we can create a list here, and let's return a list tile. And for the title, we can put in a text widget, and let's put in the name here. And then we have to specify the item count. So let's just say 3 for now. Okay, just to show you what's going on. So that's what this list view builder is doing. 3 of them, and we're just returning a text widget that says name. Okay, and in the position of these text widgets, I want to give the actual first names of all the users in our app. Now, because this is a future, meaning it takes a bit of time to load the information, we have to wrap this widget in a future builder. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this list view and we're going to put it in a future builder. And so in this builder, return the list view. And we also have to specify the future. So basically this is saying, what are you actually waiting for? Well, I'm waiting for this to execute. So get the doc ID. So this is the future builder. It's going to wait and get the document IDs. And once we got the document IDs, then we can return the list tile. Okay, and also once we've got the document ID, it'll fill up this list of documents. And so instead of just printing an explicit 3, we can say doc IDs.length. So just however many documents we have in our list. And then the important bit of code is going to be in here. Okay, so let's say doc IDs and then the index. So if I save this and I run it, and then it's displaying all of the documents. Now it looks like that's a double repeating, and that's because I was calling it in the initial state before. So that's why I was adding double. So let's just get rid of that. And so in our future builder, let's wait for the method to execute so that we get the document IDs, and then let's return it in our list view builder. So you can see these document IDs. That's these document IDs. Right? So we are one step closer. Now let's go to this inside of each document and try to grab the first name. Now for this, I'm actually going to create a new file so that everything is nice and organized, I'm going to create a new folder called read data. And inside here, let's call it get user name. So let's create a stateless widget called get user name. So what I want to do is I want to call this widget when I've got a document ID, and from that I just want to get a first name. So that means we will require a string of the document ID. And let's create the constructor for this, but require it. And then the first thing we're going to need to do is to get the collection. So collection reference, we're going to call it users, is equal to Firebase firestore.instance. And the collection is users. Okay, so now we've stored the users into here. And instead of returning a container, we want to return a FutureBuilder. And specifically, we want to have the document snapshot as the type. And so for the builder, let's grab this guy. And so this snapshot tells us about that information. And so what I'm going to do is, let's first of all do a quick check and say the snapshot dot connection state. So this will help us determine if it's loaded or not. And so if the connection state is done, meaning it's fully loaded, then let's grab the data from the snapshot. So the format I want the data to be in is a map. And the first bit of information is a string. And then after that, it can be dynamic. And let's just call it data. And then grab the snapshot, make sure the data is not null. And we want to get this data as this type. Cool. So if you're not very familiar with what this is saying, the map and the string and the dynamic, if you remember from our register page when we're adding a user, like this kind of format, this is what the map is. It's like a string, and then this one can be dynamic. It could be a string or an integer, like this age. So this format is what I'm trying to get the data to look like. So now that we got the data from the snapshot, let's return something. Let's return a text widget, and let's say the first name. And from the data, I want to grab the first name. Cool. And then if this doesn't execute, let's just return a text widget that says loading. Awesome. So everything is almost set up now. So once we get the snapshot of the data, let's convert it to a map. And then from that data, let's collect just the first name. And by the way, this string should correspond to this string that you're after. Okay, so first name is what I'm trying to get. And that's what this is saying. Awesome. Now let's give this a go. Let's see if this works. So in our home page, coming back to our FutureBuilder, we're getting the document IDs. And then right now, we're just printing the document IDs in a text widget like that. And so now, let's say get user name, and it requires us to give it a document ID, which we can. And let's save this. Cool, so it's loading and it's not actually working. And that's because I just realized in our FutureBuilder, we should specify a future. So what are you waiting for? Now, in this one, it's users, and then the document, and we have to give it this document ID to load. That's what we were missing. So let's save this and restart. And it's loading, and then sweet, now I got the first names of everything in our database, like Steve, Bill, Michael, Cristiano. Sick. And so like I said, this data that I said first name is what we're fetching from our Firebase. So if I say like last name, right, and just change this to last name, it gets all the last names. Okay, and the last one's null because I don't have any information for that guy. Awesome, so that's how we read the data and display it back onto our screen. Now, just before we make this a little bit more pretty, I'm just going to do a quick summary of what happened just then. So coming back to our homepage, we created this empty list of document IDs, and we created this method called getDocumentIDs. And what we're doing is we're going to our collection of users. Okay. And then we're looking at each of the documents and we're adding it to our list of document IDs. Okay. So we have a nice collection of these individual document IDs. Okay. So once we've got these, let's go to each one of them and just grab the first name. So now we have a list of document IDs, and then we can use the FutureBuilder and say, once you get the document IDs, let's create a list and display it here. And so initially we were just displaying the document IDs, and then we created this other method called getUsername, where we can give it our document IDs. And then this new file, once we grab that document ID, we are converting the data into a map, and we're just going to grab the first name or the last name, whatever you want. And if the connection is not done yet, then we're going to return just loading. So at the beginning, it will say like loading, and then once that's done, it'll display the appropriate name. Okay, and like I said, this here is the important bit. I could even say age, and it'll just tell us the age of each person. So hopefully you followed along. Just let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help out. But from this point onwards, this is just the fun part. Let's make this a little bit more nicer to look at. Okay, like all this stuff is scrunched up. So let's come back to our home page and let's create an app bar here. Let's display the email of the user that signed in here. And then let's sign out button. Let's create a little icon here that the user can click on to sign out. Okay, so let's just clean this bit up. So in the title, right now we're displaying this. So I'm just going to get rid of this guy and put it in here. Maybe just get rid of this information. Make it 16. So there it is. That's the user that we're signed in as. And then the sign out button. Right now we've got it on this material button here. So in the app bar, let's go to the actions. And there should be an icon for logging out. There it is. And let's wrap this in a widget called a gesture detector. And if I tap this, then let's sign out. Okay, and then now we can get rid of this material button. Cool, so this is the user that signed in, and we can click this to sign out. So let's sign back in. And for these users, let's create a nice looking list tile that displays the person's name as well as their age. Okay, so in the get username, I don't want to print that part. Okay, and let's say first name. And looking at this list tile, let's give it a color. Tile color. Sweet. And let's also maybe give it some padding. Maybe just go for gray. And so I displayed the first name. Let's also display the last name and maybe the age as well. Sweet, so there's the first and the last name. And let's just add in a space between. Cool, so there's a gap there. And finally, let's just add one more for the age. Let's put a comma after the last name, and after the age, let's say years old. Cool, like that. So Steve Jobs, 77 years old. Mitch is old. There's a lot of nulls because we created this user manually and it doesn't have the other fields. So this one, I'm just going to actually just delete. And there it is. Awesome. So hopefully you followed along so far. This is a really important aspect when it comes to app development, but just like programming in general, you know. And just one last thing is if I sign out and I create a new user, hopefully that user just pops up in our app as well. Okay, so let's give that a go. So let's register a new user. Let's say Brian Chesky. He's the CEO of Airbnb. So brian@gmail.com. And hopefully our new user is shown. There he is, Brian Chesky. Okay, and we're signed in as Brian. So now that we can read and display the data, there's a lot of things from here that we can do, which is the next letter is U in CRUD. So we did creating the data. Now we can read the data. And next we'll focus on updating the data. So maybe we'll have like a settings button that the user can click and then they can update the fields of like how old they are, maybe the name and things like that. So that's the natural next step. And also we can think about ways to sort this information, right? So maybe we could sort them from oldest to youngest or youngest to oldest, things like that. And this becomes really useful later if you have like a app, for example, that's got to do with money. Like let's say these people are tutors and they charge a certain rate, then we can have a button to rank them from cheapest to most expensive and vice versa. So a lot of cool things we could do here, but I'm just going to leave it at that for this video. Hopefully that was easy to understand. Let me know if you have any problems, but other than that, thanks for watching and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.